The dusty air of the frontier town carried a strange silence that day, the kind that settles before a storm, or a sin. The cowboy, known only as Caleb Boone, rode into Redwater with a dry throat, a heavy heart, and money burning in his pocket. His horse snorted as he dismounted near the auction barn, where men in worn hats gathered around a wooden pen. The smell of sweat, tobacco, and old whiskey filled the air, and the sharp ring of a dealer's voice cut through the noise. "Guaranteed satisfaction, or your money back," the dealer barked, his grin slick as oil. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Inside the pen stood a woman, pale beneath the dirt and fear. Her wrists were bound, and her dark hair clung to her face like rain-soaked threads. She looked young, too young for the cruelty around her, but her eyes held something fierce, something that didn't match the despair that hung in the barn. The crowd laughed and jeered, their boots thudding on the wooden floor as the dealer lifted her chin with the barrel of his cane. "This one's quiet," he said, "but she'll learn quick. Strong, obedient, a real good deal for a man who knows how to handle her." The words made Caleb's jaw tighten. He'd seen things on the trail, things that changed how a man looked at right and wrong. He wasn't a saint, not by any stretch, but there was a line even the desert wind couldn't erase. The dealer smirked at him. "You lookin' for company, cowboy?" Caleb's voice was low, roughened by dust and anger. "How much?" The dealer grinned wider, sensing easy money. $100, and if she don't satisfy you, I'll give it all back." "That's my word." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Caleb didn't join in. He took out his worn leather pouch and tossed the money onto the table. The coins clattered like judgment. "Unbind her," he said. The dealer blinked, surprised by the suddenness, then shrugged. "Your choice, friend. She's yours now." Caleb didn't look at him. His gaze stayed on the woman. She didn't thank him or speak, she only stared with those fierce eyes, like she was measuring what kind of cage he might be. The ropes fell away, and for a brief second, the air between them shifted. She rubbed her wrists, her hands trembling but her spine straight. "What's your name?" Caleb asked quietly. She hesitated, voice faint as wind. "I don't remember," she said. He nodded once, as if that answer made sense. Without another word, he led her out into the open air. The town's eyes followed them, some mocking, some pitying, but Caleb didn't care. The sun was sinking low, casting long shadows over the red dirt road as they walked toward his horse. She winced at the sight of the saddle, and he noticed how thin she was, how her ankles wobbled like she hadn't eaten properly in weeks. "You can ride," he said simply. "We've got a long way to go." She didn't argue, didn't speak, just climbed up behind him, quiet as the twilight itself. As they rode out of town, the wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of laughter from the auction barn, fading into the emptiness of the plains. Caleb felt her grip tighten slightly around his waist, not from trust, but from exhaustion. And though he told himself he'd done this just to end something ugly, deep down, he knew it had begun something far more complicated. The prairie stretched endlessly beneath a burning red sky, the kind of sunset that made even God seem far away. Caleb's horse trudged through the dust, each step slower than the last. The woman behind him hadn't spoken a word since they'd left Redwater, but he could feel the tremor of her breath against his back. By the time they reached his ranch, a lonely cabin framed by dying grass and creaking fences, the stars were already crawling across the dark. Caleb dismounted, helped her down, and pushed open the door. Inside, the cabin was silent but warm, with a single lamp burning on the table and the smell of old coffee in the air. She stood in the doorway, hesitant, her bare feet tracing the cracks in the floorboards. "You can stay here tonight," he said, hanging his hat on a peg. "There's food on the shelf. Bed's yours." She blinked, surprised, like she didn't believe what she'd heard. "And you?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "I'll sleep in the barn." She stared at him for a moment longer, as though waiting for the cruelty that never came. When it didn't, she nodded faintly and moved toward the table, her movements fragile but deliberate. Caleb stepped outside, letting the door close behind him. The night was quiet except for the distant howl of a coyote and the whisper of wind through the mesquite trees. He leaned against the fence, lit a cigarette, and watched the horizon. There was something about that woman, something that didn't sit right. Not fear, not weakness, but a kind of strength hidden beneath the bruises. A story she wasn't telling. Hours passed before he returned inside. She was sitting by the fire, staring into the flames with a look that belonged to someone who'd seen too much. He poured her a tin cup of water and handed it over. "What happened?" he asked quietly. Her hands trembled as she took it. They took me from the reservation, she whispered. Said they needed workers for the ranch, but they lied. Sold us to the traders, men like him. Caleb's jaw clenched. He'd seen the way frontier greed chewed people up, but hearing it from her lips made it worse. How long ago? 2 months, she said. There were others. I don't know where they are now. Her voice cracked on the last word. Caleb looked away, his throat dry. You've got a name, he said finally. You must have had one before all this. She hesitated, then said, they used to call me Naya. He nodded. Naya it is, then. For a while, neither of them spoke. The fire popped, sending sparks into the shadows. Outside, the wind rose again, rattling the shutters. You shouldn't have bought me, she said suddenly. Now they'll come looking for you. Caleb met her eyes. Let them. She studied him, searching for the lie, but there was none. He was just a man tired of seeing people treated like cattle. She turned her face away, the firelight catching the wet shimmer in her eyes. You don't know what kind of men they are, she whispered. I've met worse, he said simply. She didn't answer after that, and soon her head began to nod, her exhaustion overtaking the fear. Caleb pulled an old blanket from the chair and covered her shoulders, moving as quietly as a ghost. For the first time that night, her breathing slowed, steady and calm. He stood for a long while watching the flames dance across her face, then stepped outside again. Somewhere in the dark distance, he thought he heard horses, faint, deliberate, too many to be wild. His hand went to the revolver at his belt. The wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of dust and danger. Caleb exhaled slowly. He knew they'd come, and when they did, Redwater's dealer would learn that satisfaction wasn't always measured in money.